everybody, I posted earlier saying that I was going to come and talk about fibromyalgia and nutrition, and here I am. I'm going to do that. It's going to be good. So I was in a little group having a chat with some fibromyalgia people the other day, and somebody said, how do you control the chronic fatigue that goes with fibromyalgia? And I said the following: pacing, nutrition, manage rest and recovery, and appropriate exercise. That's a lot of things. I could talk about those things like all week and it would be amazing, but I'm not going to talk about them all week because I'm not going to sit here in my kitchen and talk about things for that long. So I'm going to talk about nutrition today because that's nice. So I think when people ask about nutrition and fibromyalgia, they're often looking for a fix. Basically, they're looking for someone to go, you should cut this food group or you should do this diet and then everything will be fine. And I'm sorry, that's not how it's going to work. Fortunately, that's just not the way it is. There's no evidence to support that any particular diet plan is the way forward in terms of controlling fatigue in fibromyalgia. But that isn't the end of this video because that would be a bit pointless, wouldn't it? In order to manage your fibromyalgia or any other chronic conditions well, you need to be healthy. And you need to be like super healthy because you can't cut corners, because cutting corners is just putting yourself at risk. It's risking triggering a flare and it's letting all those kind of gribbly things sneak in. That's scientific. So the cornerstones of nutrition as we know it are basically we eat adequate amounts of the right food groups. That means we need protein, carbohydrates, fat. We need to hydrate well. We need a decent balance of micronutrients. That's things like your vitamins and minerals and stuff like that. And if you get those things right, then your body has everything it needs to function well and you are healthy, and that is good times. So somebody with fibromyalgia is going to be looking at that. Look at my massive hand, that's ridiculous. So there is no cause for cutting a food group. In fact, I would argue that cutting a food group is a very bad plan. And there's certainly no cause for fad diets and things like that. Now, some people have come along and said, I've gone keto and now my fibromyalgia feels better. And that's great if that works for you. Brilliant. But a case study isn't data. And there's no evidence to support that that's a universally good idea. There are some cases where cutting certain kinds of foods may help, and I'm going to go on to that at the end of this. So, I'm going to start with protein, because protein is like my favourite. Everyone loves protein. I have found that people with fibro struggle when they don't get enough protein. It's that simple. I can tell, I'm being a case study now that's pretending to be data, I can tell the next day if I haven't had enough protein in my diet. It affects the way the body works, and that's because you need protein in order to repair your body. And if you have done any kind of exercise, or you've got any kind of injury, or just the general maintenance that is going on with your body, because your body is constantly breaking down elements and replacing them, if you don't have the protein to do that well, it's going to take a toll. And while most people in our kind of developed countries are eating enough protein to be healthy and to not suffer from a noticeable protein deficiency, they're also not necessarily consuming enough to be optimal for good health. So when they talk about the amount of protein that you need in your diet, your kind of daily requirement, that's a lot lower than what you can have in order to just be better off and be healthier. So protein is super important, and when I'm working with people I always say about having a portion of protein with every meal. It's very easy, for instance, to have breakfast and have almost no protein in it. So that's something I look at to start with. I'm going to go on to carbohydrates. People are really not nice about carbohydrates at the moment. Nobody likes carbohydrates. Why? They're amazing. And they're an easy source of energy. If you're suffering from fatigue, is it a good idea to cut out an easily accessible fuel for your body? No, it's not. It's a very poor idea, quite frankly. Your body can fuel itself on other things, but it's not designed to. Now, one slight exception I would make for this is processed sugar, because there is, when you take in a large amount of highly refined sugar, which causes a spike in your blood sugar, that becomes a stressor on the body, and that is known to be something that can trigger fibromyalgia flares. So that is something to be aware of. Generally, people with fibromyalgia have been found to do better if they consume less highly processed food, things like fructose, corn syrup, that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean you should be cutting carbs. It means you should be eating sensible carbs with decent amounts of fibre and starchy carbs and things like that. So don't think that because drinking a bottle of cola is a bad idea, that eating a slice of wholemeal bread is a bad idea. They are completely different elements, even though we might classify them both as carbs. I'm not going to worry too much about fats because I don't want to talk too long, and let's just say that you need a balance of fats in your diet. Now, while I did say that carbs are a good thing to have, and they are useful and we need them, particularly if we have energy issues and things like fibro, we also do need fats, and we have a tendency to overeat or overportion carbs. So a single portion of carbs is about a fistful. So if you're serving up your dinner, you take like a fistful of mashed potato like that. You don't, no, you just take a spoon. But that's the kind of size you're looking at. And I don't know about you, but I've kind of grown up with the idea of a plate of pasta being a dinner plate, and it's got loads of pasta on it, and then it's got your sauce in front, and that's about 3 portions of carbs. And our society often looks at things, you get something like a hamburger and chips. The bun is a portion, the chips are a portion. That's 2 portions of carbs on your plate. So while carbs aren't a bad thing, we want to portion them appropriately. And there is also a tendency to vilify fats as something. And we do want to have fats. We want to have a portion of fats about the size of your thumb on your plate. And that can be healthy things. That's probably about, how much avocado is that? It's maybe about 1/8 to 1/4 of an avocado. Depends how big your avocado is. It's probably a small amount of nuts, a few olives, that sort of thing. So those are nice healthy fats. We're going to try and avoid processed foods. Again, processed meat in particular is something that has been studied in association with fibromyalgia and found to be something that can trigger. Speaking of triggers, things that can trigger fibromyalgia include, I've said about high sugar, also things like caffeine. Caffeine is a bit tricky. Alcohol can be a major trigger. I'm not saying you have to cut these out completely, but if you're looking at the balance between how much do I want to manage my fatigue and feel well, and how much do I want to consume this thing, you might find that the balance is on the side of abstaining. I consume coffee because I'm an athlete and I don't think I could get through my training if I didn't have some caffeine beforehand. But if I have 2 cups of coffee a day, I'll flare the next day. So I have a small amount of something which I know is going to trigger me because I find that it is useful for my lifestyle. It's about adapting what works for you. On the other hand, I don't find the trade-off between alcohol and what happens the next day to be helpful to me. I just don't enjoy drinking alcohol so much that it's worth me losing the next day. So it's the kind of thing that you might want to think about. Dehydration can also be a major trigger for flares. So hydrating well is something that you want to think about in terms of your nutrition. Now, I said I would get onto excluding foods later. Now, people get very excited about things like excluding gluten and dairy and stuff like that in order to try and manage their conditions. And for some people that works, and for other people it doesn't. Interesting thing, comorbid conditions. Not everybody with fibromyalgia has intolerances to certain food groups, but fibromyalgia is comorbid with lots of other conditions. And one of the things that often comes up is IBS. And there's various reasons for that. Now, if you have a food intolerance, it's likely that that food will become a trigger to your fibromyalgia because it is placing stress on your body. And so managing your food intolerances or other kind of allergic reactions is also a really useful way of managing your fibro and keeping your energy levels up. Mild food intolerances often lead to fatigue. So if something is affecting you in that way, then avoiding it is obviously a good idea. So IBS is often comorbid with fibromyalgia, not because one causes the other necessarily, but because they are both disorders that are caused by something we call central sensitization. So central sensitization basically means that your nervous system is on high alert all the time. It's the same thing that means that a light touch can be painful to somebody with fibromyalgia, or that something might itch or burn when really it shouldn't feel that way. It's because your nervous system is freaking out at everything. Central sensitization is also something that can trigger IBS, and if you have the sort of IBS that responds to stress, then that's coming from your nervous system rather than anything you are eating. Also, another comorbidity is Ehlers-Danlos or Hypermobility Spectrum Disorders. If you have stretchy insides and poor gut motility, then that's also going to be something that you'll need to manage, and that will have an effect on your nutrition. Last thing I want to talk about is supplements. I'm not allowed to recommend supplements because I'm not a dietitian or a doctor and I haven't done blood tests on you. Anyone who tries to give you supplements who is not one of those things, they shouldn't be. But there are certain things which are useful in fibromyalgia. One of those things is B vitamins, because B vitamins are very important for the way that we access energy and release energy. So if you have a B vitamin deficiency, then you will have energy issues, and if you have chronic fatigue, you don't want to be compounding that with low levels of B vitamins. It's worth getting your B vitamins tested. Vitamin D is another one, and again that's one that crops up particularly with people with hypermobility spectrum disorders as well. It's very, very common to have low vitamin D. Actually, it's very common for everybody in the UK to have low vitamin D because we don't get enough sun, and that is the one supplement I'm allowed to tell you to take. Take a vitamin D supplement because you don't get enough sun. That's the way it is. There's other things like magnesium and manganese, which you'll find in things like active multivitamins, because they are important for the release of energy in our cells. So anything that supports energy and is going to help lessen fatigue. So that's why we recommend those. There's also a ton of other stuff. There's things like ribose, there's stuff like ashwagandha, which are often recommended, and if you're interested in those things, I can signpost you in the direction of where to find those. Precision Nutrition did an excellent article all about supplementation for fibromyalgia, and I thoroughly recommend you read it because that is written by people who are allowed to recommend supplements. So go ahead and look at that. Okay, so I've been rambling on quite a lot for a while. I hope some of that was useful. I am happy to answer questions regarding nutrition and fibromyalgia as much as you like, or anything. Just send me questions. I like questions. And I'll probably do a live or two in the next few days and cover the other things I didn't, which was pacing, exercise, and manage rest and recovery. So you can look forward to that. It's going to be good. I'll see you guys later.